Regularly scheduled meeting of the Jenks City Council, Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. The time is now 6 p.m. Roll call.
Isabel. Present. Fox. Dyke. Kalen.
Here.
OJ.
Here.
Murray. Here. Mayor Lee.
So sorry to miss, folks. Thank you to the Vice Mayor for covering for.
Okay, tonight's invocation will begin with Pastor Lucas Smith from the Church at Jenks.
Heavenly Father, we love you, and God, we thank you for loving us. And God, in times of such uncertainty and Father, struggle, Father, we pray that we would cling tightly to you. Father, I thank you for each of these public servants, Father, that serve our city so well. Father, we thank you for Mayor Robert Lee, Father, and pray your blessings on each of their families this evening. Father, would you continue to be with our wonderful city as we continue to march forward? And Father, would you use us to make your name great? Father, we love you and we thank you for the gift of your salvation for each and every one of us. It's in your name we do pray. Amen.
Amen.
Now we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, citizens' comments. Does anybody want to speak on an item not on the agenda? Please state your name and address. Okay. City Manager's report.
Vice Mayor and all members of council, I know at the last council meeting we had some questions about the Tory Lakes drainage from the Pinkston family. And I know that our city engineer has been working with them and with the Tory Lakes developer on trying to find a solution, a potential solution. And I know that emails have been exchanged back and forth between numerous counselors, and I thought it might be helpful to have the city engineer kind of give us a brief update on what is going on with the Tory Lakes drainage issue so that we're all on the same page.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and City Councilors. Since we last met, I did visit with the Pinkstons at their home. They were gracious enough to host me and show me on their property the drainage situation. This happened on December 18th. Then we emailed each other, just confirm what was said during the meeting on the 21st and 22nd. I also forwarded, because they had about 4 major concerns that they had presented in a letter to me via email. I forwarded those to the consulting engineer, and the consulting engineer responded to those concerns, and I gave those his response to them. The ponds at Tory Lakes have been built. Unfortunately, the outfall structures or that pipe and structure that releases water from the ponds in a controlled fashion was not built when the ponds were built. So the ponds filled up. The one that's on the southwest corner of the development, which is closest to the Pinkston's property, overfilled, and water came out of that pond across their property, which was on the far west side, which was outside of the easement. It just flowed over the ground and then flowed into the drainage easement and flowed out. So that was something that didn't happen as the ponds were filling up. Our infrastructure inspector, Chuck Miller, did warn the contractor that he needed to get that built, needed to pump those ponds down. It didn't happen. And unfortunately, there was water that came across land in that area. There's no structures, there's trees on that part of their property. So I don't think it damaged anything, but it did have more drainage than what should have gone across their property. Since after that, we did have dry weather. The contractor got out there, pumped the ponds down, and for that pond, he routed the water through where it would normally flow through their property, so it didn't come across the area of their land outside of the drainage easement. And they're planning to begin construction of the outfall structures next week. So that's what's happened since then. We're still communicating back and forth via email, and I'm responding to their concerns as best I can. One of the things that I did want to point out is that the design engineer provided designs that met not only the ordinance 1206, which talks about the design shouldn't put on more stormwater runoff than the pre-development condition would allow, but also they met our design criteria and our standards and specifications in what they designed. And so the city has to approve that, basically. So because they don't agree with the design, that's really between them and the design firm at that point. Any questions about what we've done so far or what's happened since the last meeting?
So when they filled the pond up, did they do that intentionally?
No, it's just from the
From
weather.
Okay,
the
so the
rain
outfall part of it, or what they were supposed to install, wasn't installed before, but now they've installed it?
They are going to start installing it next week.
Okay, which should help with the drainage going to other properties?
Well, it'll route the drainage instead of flowing across the property in the wrong area. It'll route the drainage through the drainage easement that is platted or was platted on their property already.
And I think that is an important distinction, that there is
Yeah.
a drainage easement across their property. It's not like this is, when they purchased the property, there was a drainage easement. I guess the issue is that water that's coming out of that pond, it needs to stay in that easement.
Correct.
And I think that's what is kind of being, that's where the back and forth is right now, because obviously when the pond did it filled up and then water came out of it, that water was not going through the easement. And when they pumped, they thought that, I guess there's debate whether or not all of that water when they were pumping was or wasn't in the easement. But when the outfall structure's in place, it's designed so that all that water is going through the existing easement. So
So I think that they're willing to accept it going through where it's been before. It's just that when it overflowed, that it did go to an area that they were concerned about.
Yeah.
So,
Right,
yeah.
and I think they were wanting a drainage issue. Could you address that as to why that's not a good idea or why that might be a good idea in the back of the property?
Well, they've suggested in the drainage easement area, putting in an underground storm sewer that would carry all that water through their property to the other side of their property where the stream continues to go down or carry the water down. And what I've discussed this with the Assistant City Manager, Robert Carr, and we feel that when the big storm happens, like a 100-year storm, which rarely happen, but if we have the structures underground, then that might exacerbate that already, because the pipes will at some point reach their capacity. So
Back up.
what could happen is that it would at that point run over land, and instead of getting into the pipes, that much water will now go into the back of their yard and potentially toward their house. I'm not saying that could happen or that will happen, but it could happen. But I've put forward just today to the developer if he would be willing to do anything more, because he's done quite a bit already in trying to make the situation better so that the water would flow, even though we messed up on not getting the outfall structure built fast enough. In the design, they moved the outfall further north. They moved it away from the Pinkston's property so it would flow more circuitously into the drainage easement. And they actually added a few feet to the pond so it would hold more water before it released. He's done a few things, but at this point, he's not interested in doing anything more on the Pinkston's property. Yeah.
So that I know what a drainage easement is. Is it like a ditch?
Well, it's just a dedicated piece of property that based on, depending on how the wording is, it basically says that water will flow through this area of land across this property.
It's like, it looks like a ditch kind of than what's there now.
Is it,
Through,
I'm getting at it, is it a controlled flow that they're trying to contain into where it flows from A to B?
Basically, yes. When they platted the subdivision, Snow Tree subdivision, I think it was known at that time that this is where the water goes. So why don't we go ahead and plat this easement for this lot? And it's actually a larger lot than the other lots in addition, probably because of that. So I'm assuming that's why they.
And we haven't had enough rain yet to know if it's gonna be workable or not.
Well, I don't.
No, we haven't, so I can't figure out how the pond got full. Unless they filled it themselves. Because over the past month, we haven't had that much moisture.
To my knowledge,
I'm
no one's
a
been
little
pumping
confused.
water into it.
Well, we
Okay.
probably won't have answers to any of these questions until after the first rain.
No, what I'm saying is there were pictures sent that showed the pond at a certain level, and then they showed the pond at maximum, and it was leaking over the edge. So I'm sitting here going, we haven't had that much rain, so how did that happen? Did they fill the pond?
Well, I think after, because the pond on the northeast side of the same property, that was, I mean, I drove by it a couple times and thought, wow, well, that's about as full as it can get. And I think that when they cleared all that land, I don't know, 40 acres or 80 acres, that, there's nothing slowing any of that water down. And there's now only there's basically two ponds collecting all the water from the 40 acres with no grass, no storm system, because there's nothing out there except dirt. And that's what my assumption was, is how the pond that I noticed at the, closer to Harbor was so full. I was just assuming all of that, when we had the rain, was just coming down and nothing was slowing it down, and it was just filling that pond. But I couldn't speak to the one on the south west side.
They're both the same way, yeah.
Yeah.
So what you described is true. I don't believe that anyone brought out water trucks and filled them up. But
And we had a similar problem in Hickory Creek. I don't know, I guess it must have been a year ago or year and a half ago, where they had built a pond on the northwest portion of Hickory Creek, and it didn't have an outfall structure, and it already had grass around it and everything, but Hickory Creek had no infrastructure in place. So all that, when it rained, all that water just went straight into that pond from the undeveloped land that was basically just dirt. And we had residents at that time come, and they were concerned that, the pond was getting, the pond was getting higher and higher, and there was
Okay.
no outflow structure.
So we don't have any infrastructure at this point in time.
Yeah, that's why they're building and maybe something we need to take away from this is, if a pond is going to be improved, or if a pond is going to be built, or if a pond is going to take on more water than it currently has, we need to know that outfall structure needs to be going in right away, and not.
Yes, and not before all the infrastructure goes in. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
They
like
typically start
this
from
needs,
the-
if
from
they're
the-
gonna be building this, then our codes need to be the fact that this doesn't affect the neighbors. And I know the general contractors and all the builders do not want to impact on neighborhoods. I know that. I mean, they don't have that intention. You and I talked about this. But it's like, if they're gonna be doing this, we still need to be protecting the residents linking this situation.
And
So what exactly is the resolution? I'm sorry.
They're gonna start the construction of the outflow barrier or structure next week.
Next week,
Do we have a completion date, tentative completion date? Because the spring's coming and we're going to
Right,
get rain.
rain.
I'll ask. I don't know the completion date yet.
Yeah.
But will.
I mean, I don't know how long it would take to build that structure, a week, a month, 90 days. If it's 90 days, we're in trouble.
Yeah, we're
I
in
don't
trouble.
think it's going to take.
Yeah, I know. That's why I asked the
maybe more than
question.
a week or so, but they've ordered the material. It's just waiting for the parts of the structure to get there.
And maybe we need to put something in our codes that stipulate, if you're gonna be doing this, then this needs to be in place. You see what I'm saying? It's like, we don't need to be running into this every single time they build a residential area. How can we do that?
I mean, part of it is, if anybody that owns land, whether you're a developer, whether you're a farmer that has a farm pond, you have responsibilities related to your neighbors, and the city can put can do our best to ensure that the developer or the farm owner or whoever is doing what they're supposed to do. But I mean, we already have a rule in place that they can't be doing, what happened can't be happening, and it happened. And I think starting with the infrastructure inspector and talking to him, that the expectation of developers is, again, if you're putting in a new pond or adjusting an existing pond and you have to have an outflow structure, that needs to be one of the first things you build before everything else. Because once the land is cleared, there's nothing slowing down the water anymore that's
Right.
going into the pond. So,
Right, but
But
the
Crystal-
farmer before didn't have a problem, and now we have a problem because the residential area is going in. Maybe there's something that we need to adjust as far as our codes, Gary, that we could help
Well, I mean,
with that situation. And I understand what you're
They
saying.
have a
Chris.
responsibility.
I understand. But I'm just saying, if there wasn't a problem before and now there's a problem just because there's a residential area going in, we need to address that. And that's my concern, is the fact that, there wasn't an issue before, but now that we're putting in this deal, maybe we need to look at our own.
Just that,
stipulations
if
and
I could say, because I watch
Sure.
what's going on in my neighborhood currently,
Yeah,
and it's whenever you go changing the landscape,
yes,
and you're
It
not gonna
absolutely
know
affects.
exactly, so they have got the pond. The developer didn't do what he was supposed to do in the first place, so he's having to go back and,
adjust.
as we used to say, lick his calf over again.
Mhm.
That way then, we won't know if it's gonna work until he gets it in. Chris has got him ordering the
Yes.
supplies and stuff. So, when you change the landscape, it's impossible to tell which way the flow is gonna change, because you change everything.
Mhm.
And, I live with that all the time when they started to change in the landscape. So this is what's happening here. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, just the flow is designed to go a certain way once all the improvements are in, but with any construction, you've got weather delays and things that keep you from putting everything in. And what typically happens is you start from the downstream end and you build the infrastructure from downstream to upstream when you put these things in. So naturally, typically, the outfall structure for this pond would be the first thing, because it's the furthest south, and then, or downstream, then you would move further up the system.
I would say it would have been built according to what the engineers know and how they know this landscape is going to adjust. They don't still go in and go, oh, I'm going to dig a pond here. They know, supposedly, by the flow of the landscape, how the water is going to flow.
Well,
So
that's
they
right, because
protect.
it shows the shedding of the water when
Correct.
they submit their stuff.
So
So,
Right.
they put in the grading plans as well.
Yeah.
How the grading will change.
Unfortunately.
I don't think
Okay.
but we'll keep council updated on this issue. And I think Chris has done a good job trying to
Yes.
coordinate between the
Thank you,
Pinkstons
Chris.
and the.
And I know you've
developers.
gone back and forth. I know you have. We talked about this. I just think that maybe if there's something that we can do as far as what our requirements are, maybe we need to look at that.
Okay. And I'm definitely open to that.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Any suggestions?
Yeah, I don't at this point. The main thing that I see at this point that didn't happen, that happened that shouldn't have happened, was the developer allowed the ponds to fill up and overflow. They could have had a pump out there much sooner when they saw it getting closer, so that the water didn't run off the
Into
part
the property.
that's in the area that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah,
As far as the amount of drainage, I'm still discussing that with Pinkston's on whether it's more than what they've seen before or not. So
it's better to be overprotective than under,
I agree. Yes,
so.
I agree.
Definitely. Chris, thank you a lot. Yeah,
But
thank you for the
please-
report.
On our next meeting, would you please kind of give us an update as to what's going on with it and what's been done?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are there any other questions? Sorry, I didn't.
Anything else on the manager's report, Chris?
There's a couple of relatively small items, but
Okay.
we changed the speed limit on Main Street, West Main Street.
I've been
from-
asked many times about
From
that.
Elm to Highway 75. at the police department's suggestion, because they, it being a 4-lane road, at times with the median, at times with turn lanes, they thought that 40 was just not, was kind of too slow, and most cars were going a little bit faster, and it was their suggestion that we raise the speed limit, and it was raised on West Main, I guess west of Koa, to 50, and we have had zero, to my knowledge, there's been no communication from the public to the city about this. I know that the counselors have received questions. I've received only one comment, and that was thank you for raising the speed limit. But I think that some of the neighbors in Gregory Circle and Wood Creek were concerned with the increase in speed, and so.
Yeah, I've received emails, and I can share them with you, concerns with regard to school buses dropping off on Main Street with that speed limit. And of course, if someone's coming 50 miles an hour,
They're dropping off on Main Street?
Yes, they are.
They're not in the
They should
neighborhood?
drive through the neighborhood and do that.
You talk to the school.
Just turn into the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But-
I'm just kidding.
It's going to be lowered to 45. So, but part of that is we changed the speed limit on Aquarium Trail from 20 miles an hour, which I don't know why we never knew why it was 20 miles an hour, to I think 30 miles an hour. And,
Which is still too slow.
well, the city code doesn't speak to, how those speed limits are set. State law doesn't really speak to how speed limits are set. And I think that, the communication could have been better from us to council that this was potentially going to be happening. And so I apologize for that. We'll do better in the future, but no one said anything to us about Aquarium Trail. I don't know if anyone has said anything to you guys about that, but our goal, and we can even continue to talk about if we do want to put a process in place, an ordinance in place that sets how speed limits will be set. I'm open to that.
I was at a Brownie meeting the other day that they asked us how that speed limit got increased. And
my
to
gosh.
be honest with you, I was like, the city council doesn't do that.
Yeah, well,
So,
Well, the counters at one time, back when I was with Tulsa, that they would take those counters and do the speeds. And if a certain percentile of the motorists were above,
85%, I think.
right, then they would raise the speed limit, which always got me. Then that's just encouraging them to speed. But it's interesting why or how they came up with that idea to do it that way.
Yeah.
I never got any emails on the speed limit raise.
I got a handful, not very many, couple of texts, phone calls. The one thing that did jump out at me, and I shared this with Chris, is the fact that there is a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit heading west there at Franklin, the stoplight. And within 200 yards, you have a 2-lane bridge and a veer to join Highway 75. So I think we need to address that one and probably
Good point.
The whole stretch will be reduced
to
to
45.
45, but if
If you're at the stoplight and you see speed limit 45 and you take off and then, oh my gosh, I need to change lanes to get across the bridge. I don't know.
I don't have a problem with that.
45 mile an hour, 200 yards from the bridge,
Yeah.
the way you drive, of course.
Let's just widen the bridge.
Hey, I go the speed limit,
Yeah,
okay?
that's on the plan.
And
And the bridge is on the plan.
45, I go 45. It says 40, I go 40. I don't go over, I just go what it tells me. Okay.
No, thank you, Chris.
Anything else, Chris?
I think that's all for the moment.
Probably shouldn't say this twice, Karen. Okay, NCOG report. Gary Isbell.
The December NCOG meeting was canceled. The January meeting scheduled for today was canceled. I have nothing to report. I'm anxious, though, to look at the construction schedule for the major projects through the area with regard to Highway 75 and I-44, which starts next week.
Ooh, so they're moving a little farther south,
Yeah, well, they're going to do that interchange
Yeah,
first.
I know.
and
which will
then,
take 3 or 4 years.
And then be a few years before they get down to Main Street 96.
Oh, I'm with you. Yeah, it'll be like 10 years. Okay, consideration and appropriate action relating to a request for approval of the consent agenda. Does anyone want to remove an item from the consent agenda?
Motion to approve?
Okay,
Second.
roll call vote.
Isabel,
Yes.
Caitlin,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ojai.
Yes. Oh gosh, you guys always do this to me. Okay. Remove item 2, yes, thank you, Gary. Request to approve JZ 2667 PUD core minor amendment to reduce the build lines around wells and to reduce the 25-foot build line as pertains to LT 22 Block 2, general location north of 121st and west of Elm, Marseille Hilton.
Thank you. So I can talk. This item was brought to us through a realtor for Mr. and Mrs. Brown residing at 721 West 120th Court. And they do reside in Sunnybrook. Basically, if you've gone through a lending process, there are certain lenders that will not lend to you if you have an encroachment and it is unresolved. And that was the case when they got their Alta survey. They did, in fact, have 2 encroachments. So that began a very long process. Brendan was so gracious to dig out the hard file, which was probably about 6 inches thick of documentation over years and years and years of work that was done. I tried to summarize that for you. So essentially there are 2 requests. One is to remove, to approve the build line encroachment on the front of the house. And that one was done most likely during the building process. And then the second one is to reiterate what we believe was already approved, but cannot prove it. So we think it's already been cleaned up, but we can't prove it. So we're gonna clean it up again. So on page 160 of your paperwork, we have the case before, the case was heard before the Jenks Planning Commission on January 7th, 2021, and was approved 5-0-2. There were 2 members absent. There were no concerns with the proposed changes. We did have some good dialogue. And one of the comments that I've gotten a couple of times, and I think you all have asked it as well, what can we do about this? And a lot of times we don't find these until years later because they don't always do an Alta survey at the time of the initial sale. So you may buy a home, live in it 10, 15, 20 years, and then it's when you go to resell it that's a lot of times when you discover this. And we have another one coming next month, so. On page 61, there are 11 lots in Sunnybrook that I am requesting to get relief from the build line. So there are 5 located within block 2. Each one of these, when the plat was filed with Tulsa County, it shows a 100-foot radius from an injection well site. And then there are 6 within block 5 that show that 100-foot radius. So all of these are impacted to some degree or other. It doesn't mean that the house encroaches it, but the lot does. And with that being the case and not really knowing if this was going to be an issue moving forward, I went ahead and included every one of the lots that had a home on it at this time. There are 2 remaining lots in Sunnybrook that do not have homes on them, and I did not include them. If they were ever, someone ever pursued building a home there, we would just deal with it at that time. But since they were undeveloped, I did not include it. On page 163 of your staff report, it talks about PUD amendments, and this is a minor amendment. There was no notification to the public, and the only thing that I really saw in the code, you can recommend that there's a plat amendment, but this is a very old plat. And because staff will personally make sure that this documentation is recorded with Tulsa County, it will then become part of the Tulsa land records. And anyone buying or selling a home will have access to that when they do their survey. So on page 164, there are 2 requests. This is, as far as I can tell, based on all the documentation that I read through, this is amendment number 7 to Sunnybrook PUD number 4. So the first amendment request is approving this request would allow the current and future property owners which have been identified by parcel and lot and block as being potentially adversely impacted by the 100-foot radius of the capped oil wells to lawfully exist by reducing the platted 100-foot build line as needed for each lot. And I want to point out the language as needed for each lot. And that's where I was clarifying. I do not know if any of the other homes are impacted. They may have arranged their homes so that they did not get within that build line, but just in case. So I'm not asking for all of it to be a very specific number, just as needed on the ones that we identified. Further, City Code recommends the plat to reflect the amendment, which may direct the procession of an amended subdivision plat, and that's what I was just talking about. We are going to file, if you choose to approve it tonight, we will file this and make it part of the county records. The second request is for 721 West 120th Court, and we're asking council to approve relief and reduce the front building setback from 25 feet to 20 feet. So staff and planning commission recommend approval of the two stated requests for PUD 04, and this is my amendment number 7. The alpha survey that I'm talking about is found on page 165. You can see, I don't know how good your color is on your copies, but there's kind of a, I'll show you here, there's a line right here that's in orange, and that is from that injection well site. So you can see how their home encroaches at least 10 feet. And then the red line, you can see the very corner, it's about 4 feet of the corner of the house. That's actually the garage encroaches about 4 feet. The next couple of pages, starting at 166, is really just a lot of the documentation that I found. It was very interesting to me that they went through an enormous amount of effort to get lot 2 and 3 of block 5 approved for development within 10 feet, but didn't really consider any of the other lots. And there's probably reasons for that, but that was never really stated. If you keep looking, again, there's a lot of documentation on page 178 of your packet. It shows minor amendment number 6. So I didn't really have a lot of information. I did have a lot of information, but it was a lot of duplicate information. So there are about 4 fence encroachments, but minor amendment number 6 is the only one I had any documentation on. So I kind of summarized everything on page 182. So if you would like to turn there, that's the beginning of the summary. This all started in 1983. Originally, the plat was Kinnybrook. It became Pleasant Manor. It became Sunnybrook and was filed as Sunnybrook Estates in 1984. In 1988, we received a letter asking for relief from the 100-foot well radius. And I'll tell you, it was interesting because out of all the papers, you could see when it was Kinnybrook, they had no intention of allowing lots, allowing developed lots within that 100-foot radius. So the original plat had all of those areas within a reserve area. Somewhere within that year, they changed their mind, renamed the plat, and it became Sunnybrook, and they actually platted lots within that 100-foot with no process for relief. So I thought that was interesting. 1988, they started the process for getting relief from that 50-foot radius, but it wasn't accomplished until 1995. And at that time, it only shows that it was for 4 lots. And then in 1997, they asked if they could get within 10 feet of those oil wells, and that took place in 1997. But it was only for lots 2 and 3. And then on the last page, kind of gives the other summaries. Amendment 3, 4, 5, and 6 were all fence encroachments. Like I told you, I cannot prove that any of the encroachment agreements were ever done. It was just a lot of conversation. I don't know. I don't know if they were allowed to be. I don't know if they moved their fences. I don't know. I don't know what the end result was. And that leaves us at amendment number 7. And it spells out that it went to Planning Commission January 7th. It is here tonight. It is a minor amendment. It's a build line encroachment relief for the 100-foot build line on the plat and from 25 to 20 feet in the front yard. That is it. Staff and Planning Commission do ask that council consider this request. I will tell you it is under contract and they are set to close in 3 days.
I've got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
With respect to the outbuilding on the property, which is further away from the house, was there any discussion on whether that could stay, should stay?
Nobody had any conversations about that.
Okay.
Was it brought up in your meeting? So there was no conversations because it wasn't.
Hmm.
You can include it if you,
I don't think at this point in time we should.
no, and it wasn't advertised as part of the agenda.
Yeah.
It makes it,
Wasn't in here.
it would be
Right.
unwise to.
I understand what you're saying.
I did reach out to one of the counselors that signed off on this and talked to him, and he had a little memory of the actual meeting. But it wasn't unusual to do this type of minor amendment, so I'm inclined to agree with it.
It was very interesting. A lot of the Board of Adjustment members and planning commissioners had seen this case years and years ago because they had served for that long.
If there are no other questions, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
I was gonna say, any
JZ
public
20-.
comment, any
Sorry? Oh, I apologize.
jumping ahead? That's okay. Any additional discussion, any public comment? Okay. Motions.
I would like to make the motion to approve JZ 20-667 PUD 4 minor amendment.
Second.
Roll
Isabel?
call?
Yes.
Sorry.
Kayleen?
Yes.
Murray?
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Shea?
Yes. Okay. Sorry.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Marseille. Item number 4, request approval of resolution number 727, a resolution amending the annual appropriations by $2,445,000 in Fund 27. It's a 2020 GO bond fund for fiscal year ending June 20th, 2021 to fund the bonds projects. Roberts to say that.
Thank you. So resolution 727 officially appropriates some funds from the 2020 GO bond fund. We closed this project back in December. We are $20 million richer, and now it is time to spend it. So this just appropriates an estimate of what we think of expenses will be for this current fiscal year, and it will expire in June. And with the next budget process, we will incorporate any additional funds to use starting July 1st. If you have any questions, let me know.
Okay, so what was this? I know it's in our packet, but just for giggles, what's the Fund 27 supposed to be for originally?
It is a
was
new fund.
before our time.
Right, so historically, we've established a new fund for every GO bond. So this is just a number that we selected that wasn't being used.
Okay. Any questions? Emotions?
Make a motion to approve resolution number 727, amending the annual appropriations by $2,445,000 to Fund 27, the 2020 GO bond fund for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021.
Second. Isabel?
Yes.
Kayleen?
Yes.
Murray?
Yes.
Vice Mayor O'Shea?
Yes. Request to approve change order number 003 for the 111th Street and Elwood Avenue Improvements Project. Oklahoma Department of Transportation project number STP 172B 276IG for 30 additional calendar days. Mr. Floyd.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and councilors. I actually would like to talk about change order number 3 and 4 together if I could. First of all, change order number 3 is for 30 additional days. The reasoning for that, I put a summary of those, the different delays within the memo. It's generally dealing with conditions encountered in the field as they were doing the construction project and having to go back and do redesigns and change things in the field were the general reasoning behind the delay in days. At this time, what's been estimated is they're still looking at, they think at this time, May is when they'll have this project completely done. However, I'm still putting in the monthly updates July. I think that, again, just being conservative, but that's where we sit right now as far as this delay would also encumber that potential May being done with the project. If I was in your shoes, that's what I would say. Okay, a delay of 30 days. So now when are they going to finish? Well, they're thinking May.
Yeah, because they're talking March when we were out there discussing it with them, that they were
Yeah.
looking at March. Now,
We knew that
Has
wasn't gonna happen.
the COVID and all of the issues with supplies been part of it? I know part of it was because of the Creek County water lines or something, but has supplies been an issue for getting supplies for stuff or?
I have not been told that,
Okay.
Counselor, that it's really more dealing with design issues or conditions encountered in the field, like the water line or like the fiber optic lines that they run into. And,
Okay.
okay, we got to relocate these, and that's going to take some time.
There's no mention of weather delays or anything.
No, that hasn't been part of this either.
Haven't had too bad of weather, unfortunately, but yeah,
Snowed that one
it could still
afternoon.
happen. Yeah.
I know that one time.
Yeah.
So we're looking at design delays than anything else there.
Basically, yeah, we're encountering something that should have been caught during design, wasn't caught, we found it, or they built something according to design and realized, hey, this isn't designed right, we need to go back into the drawing board and fix this on the fly. So those are the scenarios that come into this 30-day delay.
Okay.
The next change order is dealing with, this addresses plan revisions which address grading and drainage plan errors around structures 43 and 45. These are drainage structures on 111th Street, and it's east of Elwood. So that little part there. You see a description of the different things that were needing to be changed, but in summary, the change order overruns 4 existing pay items and adds 2 new pay items necessitated by the change in grading and drainage plan errors, which amount to a total of $20,136.61. The city has reached the federal funding cap in this project, so the cost for all of this will be taken by the city of Jenks, but no money is due right now. So any additional funds required by the city of Jenks will be invoiced by ODOT after the final accounting of this project. Staff recommends approval of this advanced clearance costs on change order 4, as well as recommends approval of the change order number 3 for the delay of 30 days. Are there any questions about change order 4?
Since Councilor Dyke couldn't make it tonight, is there?
She's in surgery.
Yeah, she had surgery today. That's
Sorry.
privileged information. Anyway, do we anticipate any further increases in funds necessary? Do you know of any other gotchas that might be there coming down the road?
The only
Design
gotcha,
changes.
the only gotcha that I'm aware of at this point is get the wording right. So City of Tulsa has requested that they be provided an improved access point to their water vault, which is on the southwest corner of the intersection of 111th and Elwood. That will require a change in the design. But one thing about that is City of Tulsa will pay for that. So
City or county?
the City of Tulsa.
Interesting.
It's
Okay.
the City of Tulsa vault. We stressed to the City of Tulsa that we've met our capital, so everything is coming out of Jenks' pocket at this point. We don't want to pay for this. It also wants this, so if you want it, you have to pay for it, and they've agreed to do so. So at this point, we're going through the design to put and what's difficult about this is there's a retaining wall in that area. So that's one of the biggest key things is we have to redesign the layout of the retaining wall to allow basically a driveway that goes up into the Oak Ridge, that corner of the Oak Ridge of Jenks addition, which they have a platted lot for City of Tulsa to access their vault. And that whole lot is just dedicated for the City of Tulsa to access there. But when they platted this, the idea was, well, they would access that through the subdivision. The City of Tulsa, they claim it's because of from the equipment that they use in case they had to take out the meter that's in that vault. It would require some large equipment, and that access point wouldn't be adequate for maneuvering the equipment into that area. So
That's the southwest corner, you said?
that's the southwest corner of that intersection, or the northeast corner of that addition to the Oak Ridge of Jenks.
Do you foresee any, with the redesign and reconstruction, do you see any issues with vision around the corner or anything like that? I'm speculating.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure. I mean, it's going to be a pretty steep drive for one thing. And there could be from where that wall is, where the retaining wall ends, and then it's going to flare in. Any vehicles coming down, and then you've got a sidewalk there, there might be some issues, but I don't think any construction equipment is going to be moving very fast. I mean, they're basically coming down that to go onto a trailer. So I think that safety wise, they should be going slow, but again, I don't know.
And the big question, will it cause a delay in completion?
We're trying to avoid that. If at all possible, we're trying to avoid that. Right now,
And even then, could we complete it and make it come in after the fact and finish their work?
the thing that we're dealing with right now is we have, I've asked the question, well, couldn't they move off to another part of the project and save that until we're ready to construct it? And the fact that the contractor says there is a dedicated crew that all they do is retaining walls. And so if, I think they have a couple of weeks that they could not touch this, not get into this area. So we've got a couple of weeks to get the design finished and to get the contractor to provide the estimate. And there's also the matter of right-of-way / easement. And we're kind of working on to make sure, because ODOT will not allow any permanent structure to be put in a place where we don't have right-of-way. So I've talked to Mike Wallace, who's the developer of that area. He said he'd be happy to sign any kind of easement we need to get, but getting that easement and then getting you to approve that easement, we'll got to do that probably at the next meeting if we have to do that. But we're investigating whether the language within the plat covenants for that lot covers us well enough or not. So we may not need to do that. So we're trying everything we can to keep from delaying this project and keep it moving forward.
Thank you for the attention to detail.
Is there still the possibility, and I think I may have brought it up when we were out there, sometimes there's incentives for the developer, the designer, developer, builder, whatever, to finish early? Is ODOT providing anything on this one that you're aware of? Or?
Not that I'm aware of, but I can look into that and see.
Because that might help us not wait all the way till July, but I mean, I don't cut corners, obviously, but yeah. Okay, thanks, Chris.
Any other questions on either of these change orders?
Any motions?
Do you need to do them separately or together?
Ideal to do it separately.
Yeah.
I can make a motion to approve change order number 3 for the 111th Street and Elwood Avenue Improvements Project. Project number STP 172B 2761G for 30 additional calendar days.
Second.
Isabel,
Yes.
Kaylin,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lejeune.
Yes.
And then I'll make the request.
Thank you.
Are there any discussion? Citizen
I was
comments?
just gonna ask. I'm sorry, but thank you for jumping in. Blairsville, but go ahead.
May I have the floor?
Yes, you can.
I'd like to request the approval of advance clearance for change order number 4 provided by the Oklahoma Department of Transportation for the 111th Street Elmwood to US 75 project, ODOT project number STP 172B2761G for the cost resulting from the plan revision.
Addressing and grading and drainage plan errors.
Yeah.
Charges 43 and 45. Okay.
Yes,
Isabel.
yes.
Just saying.
Kaylin,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Vice Mayor.
Yes. Okay.
Citizen comments on that one? Oh, no.
It's too late. We were.
Oh, no, okay, too late, sorry. Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Isabel,
Yes.
Kaylin,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Vice Mayor.
Yes. I thought I was doing really well there until Carrie kind of threw me off. Just kidding. Okay. All right. I'm just taking a breather. Okay. Anybody need a break for a moment? 5 minutes? Okay, we good? All right. We now call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Jenks Public Works Authority, Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. The time is 7:52. Roll call.
Isabel,
Here.
Fox, Dyke, Kaylin.
Here.
OJ,
Here.
Murray,
Here?
Shirley.
And the general manager's report.
Chair and all members of the authority, you have the engineering projects update in your packet. There's a couple items that I didn't mention in the city manager report that I think are somewhat related to economic development, which is a part of the Public Works Authority. But the Five Oaks Lodge has usually historically has like one fireworks show a year, and they were requesting multiple this past year, and I think that we have the fireworks ordinance for 4th of July, and we have, the big public event that goes through the special event process. And then, people can get their own permit and shoot off fireworks on specific days. But there is another section in the city ordinances that allows for the public showing of fireworks, and you can come pay $50. And as long as you meet the requirement within the ordinance, which I think it's a $1 million bond and the approval of the fire chief, they can just go ahead and do it. And there is nothing in the code about notification or any process. And so we obviously, with Five Oaks Lodge having some very large fireworks displays, even though they only lasted like 10 minutes, but it's at 10 o'clock at night and some of the neighbors hadn't been notified, and all of a sudden it's, fireworks going off.
It was pretty.
Our staff's recommendation is that these events start going through the special event process at least. And I think that Teresa and the fire chief are working on updating.
Neighbors.
Well, updating the city code so it's not quite as easy to come pay $50. And then, there's at least more of a public process to get these things approved.
I absolutely think you need to notify the neighbors.
Yeah. And so that's something that we're working on. And then if you'll recall back at the beginning of the pandemic, we were having food trucks come visit neighborhoods in Jenks, and we didn't really have anything in code that spoke to things like that. And so, I think Teresa had been working on a larger, kind of a broader food truck ordinance. And because this was happening, and we thought that we needed to just kind of get something on the books that we could monitor and collect, the permits from the food trucks. We passed a much shorter ordinance. And I guess one of the potential unintended consequences is you can come get a permit and pay your permit fee and come set up, if you're invited by an adjacent property owner, set up on a public street. It worked well for the HOAs when a food truck would come in once or twice and leave. But, there are a couple of food trucks that have been parked on, I guess that's 2nd Street.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and just off of Main. And, as a part of that ordinance, the food trucks still have to follow all of whatever the other transportation ordinances we have, which is you can't park a vehicle, I think it's more than 24 or 48 hours without moving it. And so, they were instructed last week, they need to be moving the vehicle, moving the food truck. But I think it's something that I've heard from a couple of people, like, is this, are the food trucks just going to kind of set up and stay there? And I don't know if this is something that we want to, it's something that's on staff's radar, and I think potentially discuss.
So you're talking about a food truck comes in the morning, or say it's like 9 or 10 o'clock, leaves at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and then it comes back the next morning?
No, I'm saying a food
Okay.
truck comes at 9 or 10 o'clock, and let's say 9 a.m.
Okay.
Sits there until 8:59 a.m. the next morning, and then moves, drives around the block and parks again. So, I mean, it's meeting the spirit, and I mean, it's meeting the letter of the law, and I don't know.
I mean, it meets our guidelines,
Yeah.
so.
And that's what staff is, this is what the ordinance says, this is what PD right now is enforcing. But the other issue is, we have the barbecue restaurant that's set up, and then, or the barbecue food truck, and then we have a new food truck that's set up that, we had to send PD out. I don't know what we can do to get better compliance, because PD had to go out because they didn't have any permit with us. And that means that we don't know if their sales tax is going to the city of Jenks or where their sales tax is going without a permit showing that it would be going
So is it
to
a
us.
permit for how long?
I think the permits are, you can buy a permit for,
By daily or annual.
yeah.
So it's an annual permit that we said you can set up a food truck for 24
24
hours and move their food truck. So they're really not breaking any law. So
As it's
we're
written,
looking
no.
at changing that.
Potentially. I'm just saying that this is,
It's a concern.
it's a potential
So
issue
basically,
that
it's a restaurant outside of a,
bar right now.
well, I wasn't gonna call it a bar, I'll say it's a place where you go get drinks or, whatever. It's a bar.
Yeah,
The music.
music venue.
I know what it is.
Well, I think that whenever we talk about this situation, we have to get outside of one incident or two incidents. We have to think about the ripple effect of it, because if we allow one food truck, who says Smitty's can't bring in one? Who says the Axe Company can't bring in one?
Right.
Like Miss McGillicuddy's on
That's what I'm
First
saying,
Street
is
there,
that so
you
we-
could park alongside Miss McGillicuddy's. You could put 2 or 3 food trucks there, and that's littering our town.
So what are
When
we,
we're
that's
trying
my
to bring our
question,
town
is
up
like,
to speed.
what do we want to do about it?
Yeah, and I guess the thing is the intent was, the thought wasn't that a food truck would just sit there in
We're
the
just
same
thinking
spot.
like
for
8
4
hours or.
Well, I mean, I don't, and I think to some degree, even staff was thinking, if a food truck wants to go set up at Smitty's for an evening and then leave,
Right.
okay. Or if they do want to go set up for an evening at Miss McGillicuddy's and then leave. And that's what was happening in the neighborhoods, was maybe once every 2 weeks, a food truck would show up. But food trucks weren't just sitting in a neighborhood for months on end. And so, I don't know, we're working on,
Could we go as far to say no overnight parking?
I wouldn't have a problem with like 8 hours
No,
or,
not at all. I wouldn't either.
yeah, I mean, it's a business. I mean,
Sure.
it's gonna be there, you're gonna, but
yeah, just sitting there for,
like to the, an extension, like it's a kitchen to whatever.
yeah.
I
so-
get that, but I don't want to Okay, so maybe we should just bring a proposal and kind of agree on as to what we need to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then,
Could it be along the lines of maybe the hours of operation of the place it's next to?
Right.
Well, you have to think about,
Well, some of them are open till midnight.
Well,
you have to think about what you're setting precedent for.
Right.
And you're going to set a precedent. What are you setting a precedent for? So you have to think outside. A food truck is a come and go operation.
Well, it's no different than when you go downtown. It's like when downtown Tulsa, they have certain vendors that are there late at night.
Pop-ups.
Now, they're not all day and they're not all night, but it's not really I love going outside and you get out late at night and you grab a little something, that's fine, but they're not all there all day, 24 hours a day. I get what you're saying.
so,
Because we don't have a big town.
No, no.
We have 3 blocks to work in.
Yeah,
so
We're
we're,
working on that extra
we're looking
parking
at that.
too.
okay.
And if there's anything else, I turn it over.
To our chamber report, Mr. Driscoll. You've been so patient.
I have some dead threes for you guys tonight, so I hope you're ready for that.
I was looking for
Thank
coffee.
you, sir.
I don't have any complicated.
Oh,
That's a-
it's my favorite thing.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
Okay, Madam Chair, members of the authority, what I handed out is our newest Discover Jenks magazine. The cover photo actually was taken by Lisa from the Oklahoma Aquarium staff, so
That's
it's
beautiful.
of the octopus. We were very excited with how that turned out, so. I've got a couple of things to hit on, then we'll do the questions you've got. We've got our monthly report was emailed to you. One thing we're continuing to work on, COVID has certainly thrown a wrench in some of our discussions about doing some best practices trips and looking at other communities. I think we got a grand total of 1.5 in before the world shut down. We've been able to squeeze a few things in here and there, some pop-in visits, but we're continuing to look at other communities to look at. I spoke with a number of you about different areas that we could look at and visit and kind of take some best practices. One, Zach spent a lot of time, I'm really familiar with, I got friends who live there, but Northwest Arkansas, the Bentonville area certainly has some lessons for us to look at. There's some maybe inspiration in some regards. The housing situation there has changed dramatically from what it was when I first visited there 15 years ago. That's one thing I looked at. Another thing I want to follow up, last month we talked about our leads tracking. So we've updated that here in the report as well, in addition to explaining what everything is again. One lead we had that we were pretty excited about has kind of put pause on it. It was a larger restaurant that we were feeling pretty good about. They haven't said no, but they certainly said not now. We're looking forward to continuing that conversation and hopefully getting that locked back down and filling some potential retail space we've got. 3 upcoming events I want to hit on, like a Robert Bell flashback, 3 upcoming events. State of Education with Dr. Butterfield is tomorrow at noon. It's going to be virtually. If you missed the registration deadline, text me and I'll make sure you get the link to watch it tomorrow. This Friday is our first legislative breakfast of the year, and it's also going to be virtually, and that'll be Friday at 7:30. And once again, if you want to just text me, I'll make sure you get the link. And then our
I'm
annual
sorry.
banquet.
We're having virtual breakfast at 7:30.
Yes, no makeup. I mean, I have to. The only people on camera will be myself and the legislators. I should clarify that. We did have that come up with one of our virtual programs with the congressman heard, and somebody was very concerned they were working from home and were concerned they were going to be on camera. So only myself and our speakers will be on camera. And then our annual banquet, which is traditionally, somewhere around right now, has been pushed back again. We moved it to March 4th, but we have now moved it to April 22nd as we've continued to monitor some of our coronavirus cases. And we worked with the aquarium staff on some potential ideas that if numbers, we anticipate things will be better, but if they're not, some outdoor options that could still be fun. So staff is
Should have it at the new mini golf.
we could play putt-putt while we're out there too.
I wish it would be built by then. That would be fun.
One thing that we're going to do to change it, since it is going to be different, we're going to make it a little more relaxed atmosphere. So kind of a cruise attire, business casual type feeling. So I guess I agreed to that this year. I'm usually, when you're presenting a business award saying you're doing a great job, you want to be dressed up nicely, but it's 2021 or 2020 continued. So we want to try to make it as fun as we can. And then at the end of this month, beginning of this, or next month, Councilor Box isn't here to hear this, but we're rebranding our business retention and expansion program to make it a little bit easier to understand what it is. It's a business checkup is what it is. So we're going to be rolling that out as well. Continue to work on a tourism website. We are working with a vendor now to get it built. That'll make it easier for us to upload information about our community partners. And we've got a couple of projects that are continuing to be in the works that hopefully in the next several months we'll be able to speak a little more openly about them. But I would do want to thank Councilor Lynn. She reached out to me. Today's Tuesday, so I guess Friday. We did a tour of the new brewery in town, Cape Brewing Company, yesterday. Got a really good look at it, and working with the owner now to work with Jenks Public Schools. I guess after they make the beer, the leftover
hops that it's not hops, I can't remember.
the barley
JC's
or so the leftover stuff can actually be used for farm animal feed. So we're trying to work with the ag program to see if they can blend it with their existing food. So it'll be a partnership there. That
Well, they're going to, the only thing they have left to do is to pass ABLE.
Yeah.
They've already passed the health. It is absolutely, if you go on my site, I put pictures of it. And if you also go down there, you'll see how instantly Chris grew his wings.
It's a really neat space.
I mean, it is a happy place.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I mean, they just have, there's a really impressive stage, an outdoor area, AstroTurf, inside they have a little kids area, and you can see all the, I don't know what all this brewery equipment is called, but you can.
I call them the vats.
Yeah, the vats. I mean, you can see the brewing area. It is really pretty neat.
I mean,
What are their hours?
there's a lot of money in there. Pardon?
they're not open yet. I think they're
Oh, I
out.
thought they were.
No, they're waiting on their ABLE permit before they go.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
And you're gonna love this, the first event. Now, when I tell you that JC and his family, because this is a family operated situation, and they are looking ways at giving back to the community already. Like they've met with the police, they've met with the fire on how they can do, because there's certain things that they have to do to ensure that they can make sure that the police can purchase beer and stuff like that. JC's already taken care of our fire department, our police department, and the first event is they will be holding the events and fundraisers. Like if you have if Jenks has an area that we do fundraising for, they will hold a fundraiser and give you a percentage of the proceeds, like you hear. The other thing, and the first event that they're gonna have, which is gonna be you, especially Donna's gonna love this, is going to be puppy adoption.
Yay!
One of the, I don't know what his position is, but he's up here and he's real connected to Puppy Haven. And they're gonna be bringing senior dogs, though, that are difficult. And they're gonna be putting pictures of the dogs as they come closer on the side of a beer can.
Aw.
So they're looking at, so if you have anything, any idea that you would like to, present to JC, I mean, or if you all want to go collectively down there as a group, you have no idea, I would love to take you down there and introduce you and show you what is coming at us. It is unbelievable. And then you take in the stage, and there's going to be a volleyball court that's being set up, and I can't call his name, but he's an Olympic volleyball champion. I don't know if he's bronze or gold medal. That's setting up Josh's.
Hey, if you make it into the Olympics, doesn't matter.
But he's setting up Josh's.
Snow shack.
No, Josh McFarland.
Oh.
I know it's two different.
Yeah.
I got a lot of Joshes. I got a Josh here, a Josh's Snowcon, and a Josh McFarland. Anyway, that's going to be setting up the volleyball with the sand and stuff like that. And he's going to be having and interchanging food trucks down here.
Oh, good.
There's a service window, there's a patio, there's going to be those chairs.
Adirondack.
Because you're going to have 6,000, and we've been brainstorming what would be good. So if anybody has any idea for the kids outdoor, because the brewery looks out over what's going to be the park area. And inside the brewery, they have an area boxed off for children, like It won't be long before Dean can go down there. On one
But he
wall.
can't drink the beer.
On one wall of the brewery, it's gonna be the east wall. JC has already got his first artist, but he's gonna have artists, local artists that will display their artwork. And it'll be for sale. These are not, I mean, these are real thoughtful. So there's gonna be many, many ways and many things that go on. Can you tell I'm excited?
I know, but I'm very glad.
My wife wants to know when Josh's snow shack's coming in.
Well, they're working.
Okay, all right.
They've got to get the windows in. There was a little bit of a hiccup.
She'll take care of it.
But with that, Counselor Leonard and I will be glad to answer any questions you have.
Okay, any further discussion, questions? All right,
Thank you all.
thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
Okay, on to business. Item number 1, consideration and appropriate action relating to a request for approval of the consent agenda. All matters listed under consent are considered by the city council to be routine or be enacted by the motion. Any counselor may, however, remove an item from the consent agenda by request. Motion to adopt the consent agenda is non-debatable. Does anyone want to remove an item from the consent agenda? No? Okay, any motions?
Motion to approve.
Okay, roll call.
Isabel,
Yes.
Kaylin,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Vice Chair.
Yes. Okay, and request to approve, item number 2 is removed, sorry. Request to approve purchase of real property located at 416 West B Street and authorize general manager to execute contract of sale, and closing documents, and approve resolution number 2021-02 appropriating $225,000 from Jenks Public Works Authority, 1 cent capital fund balance to be budgeted to account number 53-252-5391, JPWA 1 cent capital fund, city facilities land. Any discussion? Any questions?
So, Chair, members of the authority, there's been, over the course of the last 3 years, policy decisions by the city council to purchase property adjacent to the city hall campus. As we've discussed in the past, you know, the office space on the second floor of this building is, you know, we're nearing capacity. The police department is nearing capacity. The fire department is in need of a new station, and the seniors that meet here are at capacity. And so we're looking at potentially, you know, having additional buildings and additional need for parking. Obviously, we've talked about the parking situation at City Hall isn't ideal as it stands now, and I believe it was the Wynn property that was purchased 2 or 3 years ago that was vacant and had a squatter in it that was right here. That's been demolished. The 4 homes on A Street just east of City Hall that were not well maintained. Those were purchased relatively recently and have been removed. And this house is just the next one down the block on B Street. And so because council seemed inclined to want to continue to purchase property adjacent to this, what is starting to grow, the City Hall campus, we have the realtor that has worked with the 4 houses has talked with the owners of this house, and they're willing to sell for, I believe it was $200,000. And so that's what we have before you this evening.
So it's the next house from this corner? It's the next, okay, so there's like 2 houses?
I think there's 3. And, you know, part of the issue on B Street here is there's no curb, there's no sidewalk, there's no ditch, and it's not paved. And, you know, there's parking, there's, you know, the residents there park. I think one of the residents owns a business and the business vehicles park there. And I think that you'll find as we were trying to approve a parking lot, what might have been, I can't remember now, 6 months ago, the thought was, well, the city owns, this lot, and, the road that goes in between it was really unnecessary for our needs. We'd like to close this for the parking lot use. And the neighbors at the time, probably some of the people that are, selling their property now were, objected to it. And part of the issue is, I think the space is needed for, if we have a fire station and a senior center, which both are in the works being planned right now, and PD is at capacity, we certainly need it for parking. And if we're going to be adding additional buildings, we're going to need the space. But just so you know, I mean, the realtor is continuing to talk to the other, or trying to talk to the other two houses along B Street. So,
Isn't one a business on that one corner?
well, the business is on A
On A
Street,
Street, yeah.
and is it Mojo's?
Mojo's.
Tile?
It's a little
Thank
coffee
you.
house.
Yeah, and so, but,
That one?
unless there's a direction from council otherwise, we'll continue to look at those three houses. But
Is this a fair market value of the house? I mean, did they say, oh, the city wants to buy it? Yeah, well, here's what we want. I mean, obviously a realtor's gonna look at it and give us an appraisal or things. I mean.
well, I mean, we generally pay for appraisals on property that either we are is potentially going through the condemnation process, like going, that if we need property for a road, or if we need property
Right.
for something that, council's already said we're gonna do this, and we go, like we have, along Elwood and Elm right now, we're going back and forth with all these property owners about widening Elm, and, we have, a better example is perhaps, well, on Elm, we have an appraiser that goes through and says, this is what, we have a company that's going in and negotiating with these people and saying, this is what the appraised value of the land is. Some examples of that are, we have an appraised value of $50,000, and we go and offer them $50,000, and they say, okay, well, I'll take $90,000. And we say, well, we'll give you $60,000, $65,000, and then they come down to maybe $85,000. And the question becomes, is it worth your time to go through the condemnation process and pay a condemnation attorney, or go through that process, or does it make sense to just go ahead and pay the extra amount right now?
As long as we don't feel like we're getting gouged.
So we bought
I mean,
3
that's-
houses for 400,000, is that
We
correct?
bought 4 houses here for 400 and Robert 50.
$450,000 for 4 houses, and now the further we go along,
But
are you
we
saying
bought
the
the,
higher the price is going to
well, we
go?
bought the Wind House for, I think it was 182. And that was vacant with a squatter in it. So, I mean, this is 200. Again, it's not
It's
really about the
225.
house. Well, it's 200.
200 for the house and
Plus
then
whatever
closings
the-
and
yeah.
stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just asking. I feel like at some point, kind of getting gouged a little bit.
Yeah,
That they're gonna ask for the moon, and we're just
I mean,
gonna like,
this is half,
okay, yeah,
this is half of what 4 houses cost.
yeah. And is it that is it that we have to have the house now, that we want to spend the money on it? I know.
Or is this the last one
It could
and
go
we're
up
done?
higher, but there's 2 other houses on the other side of it. So, I don't know.
Yeah. And
I mean, it's only money, but still, I'm just kind of looking at, I'm trying to
Well, I
look
think
at
those
the
are
fact that-
fair.
No,
that's
I
why-
mean, I agree with you,
Yeah.
because I was thinking the exact same thing. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we bought how many houses for 400,000, and now we're buying an individual for 225 or 220, 200. I got it. But it's the fact that I'm not gonna keep buying at 300,000 and
we are increasing
250,
the
I'm
average
not gonna do it.
property value of the area.
Yeah, because the
Yeah.
city wants it. So if this is, we need to make do right now with what we've got. Because I can't see
What?
spending, because we need to spend some money on improving our dog shelter. We need to be spending money on our police, our fire, our senior center. I mean, I have a problem with it. And it's just the fact that I don't have an issue with this. It's just moving forward, I think we're done.
Well, see, let's look at it this way. What would your dollar amount you'd be happy with?
For this house,
Mhm.
100.
Mm,
Yeah, I would. I mean, serious. I
know.
understand.
No,
I'm just saying that if we're looking at what we've purchased, land quality wise, and then we're, buying up this block, me realistically thinking, if we bought 4 houses at $400,000, 100,000. Now, I do not want it to be below what it is appraised.
no, I agree.
Absolutely do not want that. I get that. And I do not want that at all. I think if that's what the price for, that's fair market value. I have no problem with it. But we have to start
Then we have to
thinking.
flip the coin, because
Yeah.
what if they want to sell, okay?
Absolutely.
Somebody else comes in there and buys it, then we lose it.
Right.
And I think that, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, when we started talking about this block, that we had the ability to purchase, because we have no land.
Right.
So when we started talking about this, because we were talking about the alley and we talked about a lot of things
Yeah.
surrounding this here, that's why I said the need is there. So what can we do collectively to come up with a decent price that we collectively?
If it comes up as it's appraised for this amount of money, I have no issue with it.
I guess the thing that's difficult is we have property appraised, hundreds, thousands of parcels that are appraised as a part, that have been a part of the Creek Turnpike interchange, Main Street, South Elm, Elwood. And if our policy was, we're only going to purchase at the fair market value, or what our appraiser says it's worth, then the alternative is condemnation. And in this case, I don't know that is the alternative. I think it's just, then we won't purchase it. But in those cases, the condemnation, we're still in condemnation litigation with the Sparkmans on their property that was condemned in 2015, and we've spent
It'd be
over
no different
$500,000
than,
in legal fees, and we might end up having to pay what they wanted and pay their legal fees. And so it's like, but with this, I think the goal of what staff is trying to do is say, this property, this owner, and again, it's not like this person listed their house for sale. They've been approached and said, would you be willing to sell your property and move somewhere else? You live in this house, would you move? And, their response is, sure, for, this amount of money, $200,000. Like, they didn't come to us and say, oh, I want to sell my property to you. And so what staff is trying to do is say, this is the opportunity if you want it. If we really don't think, because the last time, when we were purchasing the 4 houses, the discussion was about, it would be great if we could get this, basically this block. And so.
I know the original intent was, we got this house and we were gonna put a parking lot, extend the parking lot, and that was it. And then we had the opportunity for these houses. Are we looking at maybe the goal of the new fire stations, senior activity center, going that direction? Is that in the back of your mind?
I'm trying to brainstorm.
No, I understand, but I know we're talking about land, and I'm saying, is that a potential? If that's a potential, I say, yeah, then I see where we need to take advantage of what we can. But if it's just well, we're gonna buy it and level it and we're gonna sit on it for a while, we don't have the money to build these buildings. But I'm just trying to look at putting my long-term goals together. Is that?
Well, I mean, and that's what I think the long-term, the fire station's over here. We've talked about it going in Central Park.
Right.
So you're essentially you're not having to spend money on that land because we already own it.
Right.
You are basically doing away with the majority of that park. You know, and so we've talked about it going, you know, the possibility of it going over here and keeping that park there. We've also talked about, you know, PD being at their basically capacity. I mean, I spoke with, you know, Major Brown and Chief Arthur about it. It's like, they don't think they can, you know, if in the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to be adding officers, there's not a whole lot of room in there for them to go. And they can make do, but the building really wasn't ever meant to be a police station. The jail is in this building, the dispatch is in this building, they're not connected to it. Does it make sense at some point to expand this building so the PD can be in this building, expand it to the east? Perhaps, you know, and then at that point, you know, could be another use for this, for the police station. It's fluid. It's tough for me to say, like, you know, that's why staff is basically saying, you know, recommend that the JPWA consider the purchase, because that's what we're kind of doing. We have the opportunity to purchase this property at $200,000, and, you know.
No, I really don't have a big issue with that. I think that the biggest thing is that if we start out, we're gonna have a parking lot, and now we've expanded into this. I think that that's our understanding, is like, it was this, now we're doing this. We just kind of need to know, what are we doing? So, I mean, I don't have a big issue with it. It's just the fact that we'd kind of like to be included as to what the thought process is going on.
Well, I think it's what he kind of shared just now.
No, I'm just saying that, but we're just now understanding what you're looking to do, and I get it. It's just, it'd be kind of nice to.
David, are you familiar with any plan, I mean, of value of homes, or Marseille with planner? I mean, have you guys planning commission or planning? Is that anything that you ever look at or see? Am I stepping out?
I don't think that we're gonna.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
A couple of things I'd like to say. One, the property would switch to commercial, which would give it more value in the future, based on the purchase price. So that's one thing to consider. And would the city consider buying a right of first refusal to that property and the rest of the properties on the block? I'm sorry, purchase a right of first refusal for that property and the remaining properties on that block? I don't know. That might be a Teresa question.
Oh, I mean, I think we can, but whether it's something we're interested in, I guess, would be up to you. I think it's something we can look at, but that would be a policy decision for you all, and Chris, and also, I don't know if we have any indication of the interest of the other owners this way.
Okay.
That is a thing you can do.
Yeah. Something to think about.
Any other questions? Discussion? All right. Any motions? Oh, wait.
Well, you know, and this is part of the, I think part of the discussion then is, it seemed like there was quite an appetite before, and that's why we brought this before council, and it'd be nice to get direction. Like, if the answer is no today, then yeah, we're, you know, that's it. We won't, you know, focus on this at all, or bring any of these back before you. If the answer is yes tonight on this item, it'd still be nice to know, well, you know, is this it? Is the goal to continue? And I don't know in what discussion it was talked about, you know, that whole block, but it seemed like there was an appetite for it. And that's fine if there's not, but getting that direction from council on, and I think the part of it sounds like too, like we just need to talk about what are we going to be, you know, as we expand. We thought for years that we were going to be purchasing the library and that that was going to be another city facility. And that was basically, since I got here in 2015, that's going to be purchased by the city. The library hasn't done anything, and they've held on to that property for the
That's
last
because we can't
6
get them to
years.
move on the piece of property that they have down on Main Street. So we cannot look at this area. So I understand expanding
going that
towards
direction.
this direction.
Yeah, as
I
opposed
get
to
that,
going
and
that
I'm not
direction.
opposed to it. I'm just saying it would be nice to understand when we purchase these properties, what our intent is with the property.
Well, I don't think we can say, this is what I'm hearing, as I hear Craig and you and Gary and everybody, until we know how much we get,
Right,
we're not gonna know what we can do.
right.
So until we make the purchase and own the land, then, because.
Then we'll know how much we have to work with.
Then Greg Helms
Yeah.
can go and cut different models, having worked with him on the senior center
Yeah.
and stuff, how he takes a piece of property and he puts a building on it, and then we can figure it out, but he can't do it unless we buy it. And
I'm
we
not
know that our
opposed to it.
city has not been able to grow.
Yeah.
Because of constraints of land. And if we lose this property, that's gonna bind us up all around here in all 4 different directions. And so that's the concern that I have, whatever way you guys want to do it.
I agree
I
with you.
agree. I don't have a problem with us expanding and doing it, and I still have the same intent that we had of, if we're gonna buy the property, to do something with it. I'm just speaking out, making sure that we feel like we're not getting gouged for it. That's where I'm speaking from, Chris. I'm looking after, trying to look after, you know, our money, and feel like if we're getting it for the best buck that we can, and that's what we're gonna do, and we're gonna do something with this land, then I'm all for it. I have no problem with that. I just want to make sure and speak up that we're spending it correctly.
I'm in favor of the purchase. I think it's an opportunity that we shouldn't pass up on at this time.
So is
I think
that
we
your
should be
motion?
cautious going forward with the amount we're paying
Yeah.
of the citizens' money.
Now, help me out. Because whenever we go looking at things to buy, like you're gonna buy a home, we're gonna buy a home, we're gonna sell a home, they do comps around, right? So if I understand the process correctly, to your point, that blue house next to this rock house that we're talking about now, it can only stay according to the comps within that neighborhood. Is that right, wrong? You know, when a realtor goes and pulls up different houses.
What this house sold for, what
Oh,
this house
yeah,
sold
yeah.
for.
Uh-huh.
So that blue house they could, but we wouldn't pay it, go up to 3 or 350. See, we wouldn't pay that. So when we talked about the 4 houses before, the realtor had pulled up the comps on the surrounding, and it was lower than what the properties like Mojo's and stuff like that sold for.
Yeah, and the issue that we have, this all started with a vacant house where there was a squatter, we were having trouble. There was a trailer parked there, it was a big problem. We had somebody else around town who wanted to buy the property, who literally was saying they were gonna make it a junkyard. You know, it was a problem, but it was an empty house that was purchased for $182,000 that, it had no value, other than the threat of what it could be, what it was and what it could be. And that was kind of the appetite for purchasing that. You had those 4 houses on A Street that, I think anybody would agree, that was underutilized property. It wasn't maintained well, and it was kind of, it wasn't a good situation, or wasn't an ideal situation. And those properties have been listed before, years ago. And so it's someone that doesn't live there, someone that is a landlord that's owned the property for a while and is willing to sell, has even listed it before, I think. And so we do have a different situation with the rest of if we're looking at it, these 3 houses on B Street, I mean, I believe they're owner occupied, and it's a different situation going to knock on someone's door who hasn't had their home listed. It's like, oh, well, am I interested in moving? Well, I guess it's going to have to be worth me moving. And what is it worth to the city to acquire those 3 lots or that one house there? And so, again, I think I totally understand, and that's why, it's kind of like, here's the opportunity. If you want more information on it,
I personally think that we should go for it because property is so hard to come by around here. Okay, 200,000, it is a lot of money, that's for sure. But with our growth and the mall starts again, we've got to do some projection so that we're ready for when they pull the trigger again.
So it's your motion?
That's my motion.
But it's highly unlikely that the corner house on A Street's probably gonna do anything for any time near future, right? Because it's a business and somebody just bought it and.
Yeah, I think that'll be there.
So we're not gonna be able to take a whole square block area.
Okay.
Mojo's looks great now that all
It
those
does.
houses have.
Yeah, it does look really nice.
Okay.
So you're a motion to,
I motion that we make the purchase.
okay,
And I'll second.
all right. Roll.
Isabel,
Yes.
Kaylin,
Yes.
Murray,
Yes.
Vice Chair OJ.
Yes. Not really sure what to call me there, are you? Okay, and any motions to adjourn?
Seconded.
Isabel,
Yes.
Kaylin, Murray,